Cut Pentagon spending.
Feed the hungry.
Cut Pentagon spending.
Feed the hungry. Thank you for being here, whether you are watching on Facebook. Thank you for the media coming, all of the peace activists here. Thank you for standing with hundreds of people who have signed our petitions, including the many delegates from all over this country. A few of who are here today. My name is Noel Ray-Ortega. I am a Bernie Sanders delegate, and I am proud to stand for peace. We are all demanding a more just, more peaceful foreign policy from the Democratic platform. Think about this. The United States is the wealthiest country in the world. From early on, we are constantly reminded of how lucky we are to be here, what a privilege it is to be an American. For many of those privileges, only extend to a select few. As we all have experienced over the past several months, many of our fellow citizens are severely lacking. The United States has around 600,000 documented homeless people. In Milwaukee, that's around 1,000 people a night. Many of those people are veterans. Milwaukee is the third poorest big city in the United States with a poverty rate of around 25%. The people disproportionately affected are our Black and brown brothers and sisters. What does this have to do with our military budget? The American people are consistently told that there's not enough money for our schools, for clean drinking water, for our crumbling infrastructure, for health care. We have money, but Congress has placed emphasis on military funding over people. Recent polls show that 70% of voters who identify as Democrats want to defund the Pentagon budget. 50% of Republicans want the same. Less than a month ago, an amendment was put forth by Mark Pocan of Wisconsin to cut the defense budget by 10%, just 10%. It should be noted that the 10% decrease in funding would not affect defense health programs or military personnel accounts, and the reduced funds would be redistributed to the American people. The amendment was unanimously voted down by both Democrats and Republicans. This is what the two sides came together for. Both parties are guilty of supporting militarism despite what their constituents want. This is exactly the reason why we are here today. We have the power to make change, but we have to hold our elected officials accountable. Today we have guests and video messages from those who support our peace efforts, beginning with a video from Congresswoman Gwen Moore, who was just one of 93 Democrats to vote in favor of cutting the military budget. We in Milwaukee are proud to have her represent a more peaceful foreign policy.
Thank you, Noel, and it's true. There were 0 Republicans voting to cut Pentagon spending. There were some Democrats, like our wonderful Gwen Moore, our Pocan, voting to cut Pentagon spending, but enough Democrats did not vote to cut Pentagon spending, so it didn't get cut.
Hi, I'm Congresswoman Gwen Moore. And as you know, our country is going through turbulent times. People are losing their homes, their jobs, and tragically, they're losing their lives. I mean, this deadly pandemic has killed over 160,000 Americans in just this short period of a few months. And the cases continue to surge all over the United States, setting new records almost daily in just these few weeks. And still, our president continues his dangerous incompetency by disengaging and dismissing the threat of this pandemic, despite the advice of the nation's public health experts. And at the same time, our country has been forced to face the deadly consequences of systemic racism, and they've taken to the streets. And meanwhile, the Senate Democrats refuse to bring a police reform bill to the floor. Our nation is crying out for change and for new leadership and a new direction. And we can start with the Department of Defense budget. We have to face the reality that our Pentagon budget has been bloated for years, increasing dramatically since September 11th, 2001. The war in Afghanistan is the longest conflict in our nation's history, and it shows little sign of ending with a supposed peace deal in hand. And the U.S. spends more money than any other nation on our military. And they can't say with a clear conscience that all this spending has produced more peace and better all outcomes for Americans and for our brothers and sisters in other countries. And yet our policies continue to be and to try to use the military to solve all of our problems. And with this treasure that we throw at defense, and not even helping the military itself, and this past year just has raised real concerns about what we're doing. We need sensible defense spending that meets legitimate national security needs, and we need to desperately invest in our other pressing needs. And even prior to COVID, we had the highest rates of poverty among wealthy consequences, the highest cost of healthcare with the worst health outcomes. These issues deserve investing in housing and education and social services and healthcare, and just simply reducing our defense budget and changing our national security priorities can help us do this. This America First strategy has been a bust, and we've been glad handling with tyrants and relying on sanctions alone. These endless wars just don't make our nation safer. This America First is simply a reiteration of policies that have failed over and over for decades. We need smarter policies that start with a stronger State Department and emphasis on diplomacy and re-engagement with our allies. We need to re-engage with Iran to restore the Iranian nuclear deal, to re-engage with the United Nations in a serious way, and to make clear that we will work with others to solve global problems that face us all. I thank the tireless advocates in our community here in Milwaukee for fighting for a foreign policy agenda that truly, truly reflects the needs and priorities of our country. And as your representative, I will continue to work with you every step of the way.
So next up we have Chris Walton, who is a Biden delegate and the chair of the Democratic Party of Milwaukee County.
All right, Chris.
Thank you. How's everybody doing this afternoon? My name is Chris Walton. I'm the chairman of the Milwaukee County Democratic Party. I am a delegate for Joe Biden to this Democratic National Convention, and I am here because I agree. We need to end these forever wars. When I growing up, since I've been alive, we have been at war at 3 different instances. The Persian Gulf War, the war in Afghanistan, and the war in Iraq. Not to mention all then from Libya to Venezuela and beyond. It is time that we stop putting so much money into our war fighting abilities and actually put money into our foreign policy and actually use our State Department for what it's for, the peace that it's supposed to bring. We can't keep doing the same things and expecting a different outcome. That is literally the definition of insanity. This administration has been terrible for U.S. foreign policy. When we're spending more time fighting with Denmark over Greenland than actually trying to make sure we're not creating a nuclear program in North Korea, that's a problem. When we're spending more time breaking peace agreements with Iran and trying to help Russia get cruise missiles, that's a problem. We need to do everything we can to make this nation a nation of peace. We cannot do 4 more years of the Donald Trump America First policies that is doing everything but putting America first. It's threatening America's peace. It's threatening America's allies. And it's making our enemies laugh at us, as we see daily, and not even just our enemies. We're seeing the Prime Minister of England, the Chancellor of Germany. These are rock allies of the United States of America, and they spend more time laughing at the antics of Donald Trump than actually trying to bring peace to this planet. That must change. We can't keep fighting wars that we don't need to. We can't keep being involved in conflicts that make no sense and have no actual national security goals. I think it's time for a change. We can't do 4 more years. It's time we change that, and it's time we get rid of Donald Trump. We need change this upcoming November. And I urge you all to please register, sign up for an absentee ballot, and make sure we're getting rid of Donald Trump and making Wisconsin blue again this November. Thank you.
What do we want? Change. When do we want it?
November.
What do we want?
Change.
When do we want it?
November.
What do we want?
Change.
When do we want it?
November.
And forever wars. And wars forever. And forever wars.
And wars forever.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much, Chris. To give a proper introduction to the billboard itself, we have a statement from David Swanson of World Beyond War.
Hi, this is David Swanson. I'm the Executive Director of World Beyond War, an organization that does education and advocacy but does not support or oppose political candidates. So why would we work with all of these other great groups and individuals to put up a billboard near a Democratic National Convention, a billboard that says 3% of U.S. military spending could end starvation on Earth? Because almost nobody knows that fact, or the whole package of facts implied by it, and because almost nobody acts on it. The U.S. government spends some $1.25 trillion a year on militarism across numerous departments and agencies, not just the $750 billion that you hear about going to the Pentagon. Recently, Congress voted overwhelmingly in both houses against moving just 10% of that $740 billion Pentagon budget, or $74 billion, to human needs. The 3% figure on the billboard is based on rounding the military budget of $1.25 trillion down to $1 trillion, both to be grotesquely conservative and to make the math super easy. 3% of $1 trillion is $30 billion, which is what the United Nations has said it would cost to end starvation on Earth. Interestingly, immediately after voting down that shift of $74 billion and passing the budget of $740 billion, the U.S. Congress took up a measure to dump another $30 billion of graft into the military as part of a pseudo-coronavirus relief bill. According to polling by Data for Progress, prior to Congress voting down that 10% move, U.S. voters favored exactly what they voted down, by 56% to 27%. And if told that some of the money would go to the Centers for Disease Control, the public support was 57% to 25%. These were predictable numbers, in line with similar polls for decades. In fact, support for moving funds out of the military has often been stronger than that. Among voters who identify as Democrats, this latest poll found 70% wanting to defund the Pentagon, whereas among Republicans it was 50%. But among Congress members who identify as Democrats, you get 40% voting to defund the Pentagon, and among Republicans, 0%. Of course, many of those Democrats would switch their votes on command from their party if the measure was in danger of actually passing. But that 40% gives people the impression that the two parties are different, even though the outcome is always the same, even though the majority of what Congress does, which is militarism, it does with bipartisan harmony and the total absence of gridlock. Unless, in obedience to the corporate media, you're obsessed with renaming bases or whatever the designated distraction is this time. If the opposite of pro is con, what's the opposite of progress? Clearly, this Congress would vote down a proposal to move $30 billion to ending starvation on Earth, even though doing so would reduce hostility toward the United States while militarism increases it. But Congress doesn't want to vote on such a proposal and would vote this billboard down if it could. Did you know that you can't put this billboard up in many parts of the land of the free, such as in the Washington, D.C. metro system, where ending starvation falls into the disreputable category of political, whereas all the ads for fighter jets in the subways are clearly just product sales, since most metro riders no doubt hurry home and buy their own fighter jets? The Democratic Party platform makes clear a plan for plenty of wars to come, but promises that wars will be waged, quote, with the informed consent of the American people, end quote. Of course, this is a blatant accidental misstatement of the truth, or what the uncouth would call a lie. Franklin Roosevelt blocked the Ludlow Amendment over 80 years ago, and Congress is not about to let us vote on war or peace. So our alternative is every other nonviolent tool available, including filling the streets with people and filling them with billboards.
So, Noel, I just want to point out that World Beyond War wanted me to tell everybody to make sure they see that worldbeyondwar.org website, to go to that website and to sign up to say, take the pledge against war. So please, people, go to worldbeyondwar.org, take the pledge against war. Thank you very much.
Next up, we have Mark Forman. He joined the Navy soon after graduating high school in 1966. In early '68, he was sent to Vietnam with the Marines and was severely wounded 5 weeks later. Mark would like to tell you what he learned about the military and American foreign policy.
Okay. Thank you, and thank you all for being here. My name is Mark Forman. I'm going to take this mask off. My name is Mark Forman, and I am not a proud veteran of the Vietnam War. In fact, I've been quite angry at our government's foreign policies for the past half century. I am a proud lifetime member of Veterans for Peace, and that's why I'm here today to speak in support of significantly reducing our military budget. 52 years ago, my right hip was blown off in Vietnam. I was with 83 Marines surrounded by 1,500 North Vietnamese for 6 days. 70% of us were killed or wounded in the first 10 minutes of the battle. I was wounded on the second day and laid on the mountain for the next 5 days, waiting to die or be medevaced if they could get to us. I went to Vietnam believing that I would be able to play a significant role in preserving freedom and democracy for the United States. I was just too young back then to understand how powerful some corporations are who profit from war. Companies like Lockheed Martin, Bowen, General Dynamics, and Raytheon are making hundreds of billions of dollars every year to build the war machines. And who pays it? We do. While young men and women in the armed forces fight and die in deserts and jungles around the world, these war profiteers have become some of the most powerful lobbyists in Washington, D.C. now. The billboard above us sheds light on just how enormous and out of control our military budget has become. We, the people, need to stop our legislators from voting every year to add more and more of our tax dollars to the military budget. And if they don't do it, we need to elect new people who will. It's time to invest in our people, not war. Thank you.
Listen to the people.
Not the corporations.
Listen to the people.
Not the corporations.
Listen to the people.
Not the corporations.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, now we have Steve Watrous, who is president of the United Nations Association of Greater Milwaukee.
Hi, thank you all for coming on this very nice day. We're not the United Nations. You can see by my shirt, we're actually a support group. We support the goals of the United Nations. Some of you may have heard of Trick or Treat for UNICEF. That's part of the thing that we do. As far as that billboard, if somebody's going to feed the poor, the starving people around the world, it's the United Nations. It's the World Food Program. So I'm just going to say a couple of things of what the United Nations has put out concerning this issue. So the Secretary General is named Antonio Guterres. He says, the fury of the virus illustrates the folly of war. That is why today I'm calling for an immediate global ceasefire in all corners of the world. This is from March. To warring parties, pull back from hostilities, silence the guns, stop the artillery, end the airstrikes. This is crucial to help create corridors for life-saving aid, open windows for diplomacy, and bring hope to places among the most vulnerable in the world to the spread of the COVID-19. Gutierrez estimated that 135 million people are facing starvation by the end of the year. The World Food Program, which would administer the aid if it ever came from that purpose or others, and by the way, UNICEF, collecting for UNICEF at Halloween is not sufficient. We really have to go for big policy, for big money people. The executive director of the World Food Program, David Beasley, said in July, the cost of the World Food Program's response is estimated at $4.9 billion to deal with starvation. A lot of money, but compared to the Pentagon budget, think about it. Make no mistake, if we do not act now to end this human pandemic of human suffering, many people will die. We've got to get that money to them somehow. It's not a next year thing. We can't wait till January. We need to get going to get the Pentagon or somebody to chip in that money, otherwise we've got an even worse human disaster than we do now as far as starvation. Thank you.
Thank you. Feed the hungry. End the wars. Feed the hungry.
End the wars.
Feed the hungry.
End the wars.
Feed the hungry.
End the wars. Next up, we have Stephen Shea, who is the Milwaukee County Supervisor for District 8.
Thank you. My name is Stephen Shea. I am a county supervisor. My office is right over this way. 60 years ago, Dwight Eisenhower, a president of the United States, 5-star general, and should be noted, a Republican president of the United States, mind you, told us, warned us, that a military-industrial complex was gaining power unto itself, and that every American should be on guard. Well, it was true then. It's even more true now. Already this century, we've spent trillions of dollars on wars, and nobody seems to know what we accomplished. In my race in 2018, this is for a county supervisor race, mind you, $200,000 was spent totally in that race. When Dwight Eisenhower was president, that would have funded a successful U.S. Senate campaign. Still had money left over. And if you were Bill Proxmire, it'd have had all the money left over. It is up to us, every one of us Americans, to make sure that we take back our government from special interests, and there is no interest more special than the military-industrial complex. You know, we say, oh, when the county government comes to budget time, we fight over every $1,000 for parks, for buses, for health care, and there's never enough. We say there's not enough money. Well, there's a reason there's not enough money, because that money is going to the special interests. Right now, government's planning on a multi-billion-dollar new fighter jet that we don't need to fight against enemies we don't have. It's up to each and every one of us right here to hold our elected officials accountable for the money they spend and for the money that they collect. Because when it now costs, presidential campaigns over $1 billion each, U.S. Senate races can cost $50, $100 million. That money's got to come from somewhere. Well, it's not coming from the average person, I can tell you that. It's coming from the special interest, and the biggest special interest of all is the military-industrial complex. Thank you.
Next, we have Sachin Chheda, who is a Biden delegate and former chair of the Milwaukee Democratic Party.
There's the chant you want. Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Jim and Laura and all the people who put this great event together, into the international and national media that are here. The folks who are gathered here today represent a very diverse set of people. We're Biden delegates, we're Bernie delegates. There are folks here who are supporting this ticket for president and vice president. There's some who maybe are not. But the thing that unites this group of people is a dedication to peace,
to ending the march towards war, to reducing spending on the military. And that is a very mainstream point of view. It is actually something that unites Americans. People don't want more war. They don't want to see more of our young men and women sent overseas in service of political interests that don't advance American interests and don't advance global peace and justice and prosperity. And those mainstream views represented here carry to domestic issues, because they're deeply connected to the same fight that we're having in the streets here in Milwaukee and across the nation to re-engage our investments away from police and armed intervention into the human needs that people want to see in our communities. We need to do that globally, and we need to do that here in America. And the way that we do that is by rolling back the massive increased investment that Donald Trump and his administration have made in the military, and refocus that on education, on healthcare, on protecting the environment, on investing in jobs and in families and in real people in our education system, so we can have a stronger country for everybody. Now, I will say I'm proud to support the Biden-Harris ticket. And I was a Harris supporter in the primary. I was not a Biden supporter. And so for most of us here who are supporting the tickets with a huge array of candidates, there are a lot of people that we supported. But we see Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as a vehicle. It's not that we expect them to lead us out of the wilderness. It's that we expect the people to lead. And for those politicians, whether they're in the White House or the U.S. Senate or the U.S. House or here in the Madison State Capitol, we expect them to follow the people and to make those investments the way that we have chosen and the way that we think will move the country forward. I've heard this analogy, so this isn't mine, but it's like public transportation. When you get on a bus, that bus might not drop you off right in front of your destination. It might drop you off a block or two away. You might even have to change buses along the way. You might have to take a train and then a bus. If it's not on the bus route, you might have to take a taxi cab. But it gets you as close as you can, and that's how we see politicians. They're our path to getting to where we want to go, but where the people want to go is a new America that turns things around and reinvests in people. Are you all with me on that? Yeah. Now, I think we can head in the right direction with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. I'm proud to support this ticket. I think we have to hold their feet to the fire. I don't think this is about saying let's elect them and then trust them to do what's right. We elect them, and then every day we're marching in the streets, we're writing letters, we're writing op-eds, we're meeting with these politicians in their offices, and we're doing everything we can to hold them accountable so that that investment gets made in people. And that marching has been happening here in Milwaukee and across the country for the last 90 days. I know Representative Bowen's been out there almost every day. I've been out there a few times. I encourage people in a safe and social distant way to keep marching in the streets from here and all the way to those voting booths, hopefully in the mail or at a drop box or at your polls on Election Day. And then don't stop there, because we need to hold these folks' feet to the fire all the way to a new America. Thank you.
Not the corporations.
Listen to the people.
Not the corporations.
Listen to the people.
Not the corporations.
All right.
All right, next we have Pam Richard of Peace Action, Wisconsin.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to talk about some very good legislation that's been introduced by members of Congress on nuclear weapons policy and spending. Unfortunately, none has passed. The Trump administration and the nuclear weapons industrial complex is expanding nuclear weapons strategy and spending. At the same time, President Trump has undermined arms control and non-proliferation treaties. We know how many treaties he's broken. Important steps need to be taken to reduce the risk of a nuclear war or prevent one by abolishing nuclear weapons altogether. Some steps that could be taken is to prevent first strike use, taking nuclear weapons off of hair trigger alert, taking away the presidential finger on the nuclear weapons button, prohibit new nuclear explosive testing in Nevada. There's a plan to spend up to $2 trillion over the next 30 years to expand and replace virtually every nuclear weapon in the nuclear weapons arsenal. This has to be canceled. The U.S. must join the UN treaty to prohibit nuclear weapons, and that calls for the abolition of all nuclear weapons on the whole earth. Right now, there are 44 nations who have ratified. We need 50 nations to ratify for it to pass into force. Some of the legislation, H.R. 2417, introduced by Eleanor Holmes Norton, Democrat of Washington, D.C., and promoted by the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, is the Nuclear Weapons Abolition and Economic and Energy Conversion Act. It calls on the U.S. to dismantle every nuclear weapon in its arsenal and join the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, to switch to a carbon-free and nuclear-free energy and to an ecologically sustainable, just economy. H.R. 921 by Representative Adam Smith, Democrat of Washington, establishes a policy that the U.S. must have no first use of nuclear weapons. H.R. 7140 by Titus Dina of Nevada is the Planet Act, preserving leadership against explosive nuclear testing. And this prevents any funds being used for new nuclear testing in Nevada. S 1285 by Senator Ed Markey, Democrat of Massachusetts, is the SAVE Act, Save the Arms Control and Verification Act of 2019, never passed, requires the Trump administration to report on how it is complying with the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty and prohibits increases in nuclear spending. Okay. H.R. 4904, the SANE Act. We need some sanity in this world. Introduced by Representative Ed Blumenthal, Democrat of Oregon. And it's the Smarter Approach to Nuclear Spending Act. It calls for reductions in nuclear weapons-related spending, nuclear-armed submarines. The U.S. has 14. ICBMs, the U.S. has 400 intercontinental ballistic missiles. Long-range penetrating bombers, air sea-launched cruise missiles, W-87-1, which will require more plutonium, more uranium, and nuclear testing. And we need to prohibit this idea of a space force. We believe the whole nuclear arsenal must be dismantled, and the money should be spent on human needs and preserving and restoring our natural world. Thank you.
Next up, we have a video from Congresswoman Barbara Lee. She was not able to be here today, but she took the time out of her very busy schedule to make us a video after requesting it. So here she is.
Hello, I'm Congresswoman Barbara Lee, representing California's 13th Congressional District. Thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. For decades, I have fought to stop endless wars and shift resources decisively away from war making. We need to use our resources to fight poverty and to seek peaceful solutions at home and abroad. As we fight back a global pandemic, it's more important now than ever to stop putting military spending over the needs of people. In particular, we need to put our efforts toward addressing this public health crisis, which has killed over 160,000 people in our country, more than both the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. That's why I joined my colleagues in the House and the Senate to propose a 10% cut from this year's National Defense Authorization, with the intent for it to be used toward human needs at home and abroad. A 10% cut means $73.8 billion that could be spent on programs that will improve the quality of life for everyone. That's more than enough to make a difference. It's past time human needs come before bloated military spending. We invite you to join us in supporting this effort. Thank you.
Next up, we have fellow Bernie delegate Laura Valderrama. Thank you, Noel. Yes. Earlier this year, my comrades James Braun, Brandon Cole, Richard McGowan, Alexa Safer, Charlie Ryan, and I protested President Trump inside of his rally right here in Milwaukee. He was pushing the United States and Iran to the brink of war, and we could not stand idly by. We shouted, "No wars, vote Bernie," and got the attention of the president and the 12,000 people attending the rally. Today, we aim to get the attention of the Democratic Party. U.S. militarism and imperialism is not exclusive to the Republican Party. Both Republicans and Democrats have approved our bloated military budget and have perpetuated immoral wars all over the world. We are calling on Democratic nominee Vice President Joe Biden to adopt a more principled, peaceful foreign policy. The following letter to Joe Biden was penned by more than 50 national progressive, anti-war, and faith organizations, including the Feminist Foreign Policy Project, Just Foreign Policy, Our Revolution, and Progressive Democrats of America. I will read the highlights of the key measures they are promoting and encourage you all to read and sign the full letter at codepink.org/letter to Joe Biden. Again, that's codepink.org/letter to Joe Biden. Dear Vice President Biden, we write to you as a broad coalition of organizations representing millions of Americans who care about a principled foreign policy, one that prioritizes diplomacy and multilateralism over militarism. As the coronavirus pandemic reveals, our country and many others are woefully unprepared for the crisis we now face. Without extraordinarily bold leadership, this is likely to be the beginning of a period of profound instability for the entire planet. We believe that there is room to act aggressively to reform our foreign policy. Just as the domestic policy debate has shifted significantly in recent years, the current global context demands that we act boldly to redefine the role of the U.S. in the world. For decades, U.S. foreign policy has been overly focused on confrontation with perceived adversaries and the global projection of U.S. military power. Doing so has militarized our response to global challenges, distorted our national security spending priorities, toxified our political discourse, and left us woefully ill-prepared to confront the growing transnational threats to human security we face today that do not have military solutions. Meanwhile, the U.S. currently has more than 240,000 active duty and reserve troops in at least 172 countries and territories. The cost of the U.S. federal government's post-9/11 wars is more than $6.4 trillion. The American people are looking for a leader who will turn the page on 9/11 policies that have resulted in an endless cycle of war, countless lives lost, increased global instability, large-scale refugee flows of the displaced, and violation of American civil liberties and human rights. We call on you to show your support for the following key measures that we and many advocates around the country have been fighting for. We call on you to repeal the 2001 authorization for use of military and end all uses of U.S. military force that have not been authorized by Congress in previous administrations. We call on you to put an end to unconstitutional participation in the Saudi-led war on Yemen. We call on you to reduce the outsized influence of private contractors at the Pentagon. We call on you to end the production of new nuclear weapons and cancel Space Force. Yes. We call on you to stop the military and political campaigns aimed at regime change that have borne disaster in Iraq, Libya, Syria, and elsewhere in the past 2 decades. Yes. We call on you to end broad-based sanctions against countries like Iran and Venezuela. Yes. We call on you to close Guantanamo Bay Detention Center. Yes. And have the Senate Intelligence Committee report on CIA torture be declassified and made publicly available. Yes. We call on you to repeal the Muslim, African refugee, and asylum bans, restore access to asylum, and support a robust refugee resettlement program. Yes. We call on you to stop providing security aid and arms to authoritarian and repressive governments that systematically violate human rights. Yes. We call on you to help build a future in which all Palestinians and Israelis live under full equality by ending Israel's military occupation, disbanding Israel's illegal settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, ending the Israeli military blockade of Gaza. Yeah. We call on you to commit to ending wasteful military spending and reducing Pentagon spending by at least $200 billion annually and prioritize the federal budget towards meeting the basic needs of Americans at home. I would like to add that we call on you to abolish ICE because it is an abusive organization with a history of human rights violations since its inception. The U.S. should stop seeking to transform other countries through destructive policies and instead work through the United Nations Security Council and other multilateral fora to build global consensus and international legal backing for peaceful diplomatic solutions to internal and international conflicts. It is time to end all wars. It is time to end all violence. It is time to end all needless suffering. It is time for justice. It is time for peace. Thank you. We now have a video from Marcy Winograd, who is a fellow Sanders delegate from California.
Greetings, I'm Marcy Winograd, and I am talking to you from California, where I am a proud 2020 DNC delegate for Bernie Sanders. Thank you for coming today, for listening, for being part of this effort to promote peace in the world. And I want to thank particularly the organizers of this event, some of whom include Jim and Laura and Noel and Steve. And I wanted to thank Barbara Lee also for contributing a video to this event and for her leadership in Congress and calling for cutting the military budget, an obscene $740 billion military budget, in half. And I think it's so exciting that my brothers and sisters in Wisconsin, my peace brothers and sisters, have been working with David Swanson, and that you have a billboard up that talks about ending world starvation by just shaving off a small percentage of our military budget. It's true, right? There are so many other ways we could use that money instead of investing it in a death economy, which is what I call it. You know, when you're building new nuclear weapons or researching new nuclear weapons, building more missiles, we have enough. You know, we have enough to destroy the earth 10 times over. So I say stop, right? We're all saying stop, that's enough. And right now, these are very challenging times. We know we're facing COVID. A lot of people are out on the street, they're hungry. They can't go to school, they can't go to work. They may not, have a place to live in the near future. So these are devastating times, not just immediately, but as we face a possible climate catastrophe if we don't transition off of these addictive fossil fuels. So now is a frightening time, but it's also a time of great opportunity, a time to change things, to really move in another direction. And I want to thank our presumptive nominee, Joe Biden, for making great progress on environmental issues, for coming a long way and pledging to invest $2 trillion in addressing climate change and pledging to move us into carbon-free electrification by 2035. So those are good, those are good signs. But I think we have more work to do. And so I ask you to join me in asking our presumptive nominee, Joe Biden, to take another look at his foreign policy team. Because as much as we had our unity task forces that worked on the platform around domestic issues, we didn't have one on foreign policy. So there really wasn't much of a dialogue on that. And we need a dialogue because we know there is a connection between the militarism that we're seeing at home and the militarism that we export abroad. The way we try to police the world or topple regimes, recreate them in our own image at a devastating cost, that will come back to haunt us. That does come back to haunt us. And after 2 decades in Afghanistan and spending trillions of dollars, what have we really accomplished? So I ask you to ask Joe Biden to say, Joe, please include some visionary thinkers on your foreign policy team. Maybe use the resources that we have, the great resources, the Quincy Institute, the Progressive Institute for Policy Studies. Bring on people who have been leaders in demilitarization. Representative Barbara Lee from California or Representative Ro Khanna. Instead, what we're looking at right now is a repeat of the staffers, the foreign policy advisors who took us to war in Iraq, who wrote policies to take us there or parroted lies about weapons of mass destruction, people who advocated and persuaded former President Obama to militarily intervene in Libya, which was a disaster. We have people on the foreign policy team who left the White House to become lobbyists for the weapons industry. This is a revolving door that is untenable. If we want to beat Trump, and we have to beat Trump because Trump is a threat, right? He's a supremacist, a white supremacist. He threatens our democratic constitutional rights, right? And, he's on the take, right? This is about greed. This is about privatization. It's about destroying the public sphere, and we can't let that happen. But at the same time, we cannot invite a team of policy advisors who have a record for war and not much of a record for peace. So please, join me, join Democrats and peace activists throughout the country and throughout the world in saying, it's time for a new vision. It's time to evolve beyond war. War is a very primitive way to resolve conflicts. We can sit down, we can talk, we can deny arms, we can offer refuge. There are many other answers to seemingly intractable conflicts that frankly cannot be resolved militarily. So thank you for this opportunity to address you. And most of all, thank you for being with me and for being with the delegates, the DNC delegates, and for standing for peace.
Next, we have Andi Elliot, CEO of Community Advocates.
Good afternoon, and thanks for being here. My name is Andi Elliot, and I have the honor of serving as the CEO of Community Advocates. Community Advocates provides individuals and families with access to services that they need to meet their basic needs so that they can live in dignity. Our work is grounded in ensuring that individuals and families have access to the most basic need, safe and stable housing. We provide assistance with people that are facing challenges and crises related to paying their energy bills, paying for rental housing, those experiencing homelessness, domestic violence, substance use disorders, and mental health issues. We've been around since 1976, and for 44 years, we've been addressing people's most basic needs. In most recent years, we serve about 70,000 people each year to meet their basic needs, which, for us, we're happy to be here to help people meet their basic needs. But in looking at the way our government is spending money, putting money towards military spending rather than investing in the people of this country, if they would redirect those funds into investing in the people of this nation, making sure that there's access to affordable housing, well-paying jobs, family-supporting jobs, education, Community Advocates wouldn't be needed because people would be able to meet their basic needs and achieve the hope and dream of realizing the American dream. So our government needs to look inside ourselves and see the people, see the children that are living on the street, don't have enough to eat, or are living in substandard housing, or don't have access to jobs, and view it all through an equity lens. We need to resolve the issues that our nation has been responsible for since the founding. Look at it through equity, make sure that our government, and hold our government officials responsible and accountable for redirecting funding into investing in the people of this nation, not in the military spending. Thank you.
Now we have Kevin Solomon from the Poor People's Campaign.
How's everybody doing?
All right, all right.
How about y'all in the back? Y'all cooking out there as much as I was cooking? It's hot. Thank goodness for the shade. So my name is Kevin Solomon. I'm a state leader with the Wisconsin Poor People's Campaign. I use he, him, his pronouns, and our campaign is a nonpartisan campaign that fights against militarism in the war economy, yes, but also structural racism, and also systematic poverty, and also ecological devastation, and also these distorted moral narratives that we use to justify all of these evils. Now, while I'm here today to talk about militarism, I think it would be an absolute mistake to not talk about all of the other issues that plague this country. All of these issues have a death toll. All of these issues kill innocent people every single day. So let's talk about poverty. Poor folks are disproportionately the people who are killed every single day in wars abroad. More than 800,000 people and 21 million people have been killed and displaced by the endless wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, and beyond. And here, in the land of the free, we spend 53 cents of every discretionary dollar on military spending and just 15 cents on anti-poverty initiatives. I mean, come on, for real. Let's talk about climate. The United States military spends more than $81 million to protect oil supplies, which is more than twice what we spent over the last 70 years developing renewable energy technology. Again, come on. Let's talk about racism. Here in Wisconsin, law enforcement has received 11,000 plus items worth more than $42 million of surplus military equipment from the Department of Defense. That money directly is traumatizing our black and brown communities here in the city, causing violence to our friends and our community members. So when we talk about military imperialism, we also have to talk about economic imperialism. We also have to talk about socio-political imperialism, installing dictatorships and quelling grassroots voices around the world. And we also have to talk about climate imperialism and white supremacy. All of these ideas justify our presence abroad. In the face of these evils, it is absolutely necessary that we organize here in Wisconsin, because almost every speaker has talked about how this applies federally, but we should also talk about how this applies right here in our state. Wisconsin taxpayers contributed $11.3 billion to the Pentagon and military in 2019. $11.3 billion. Instead, with that same amount of money, we could have created 200,000 infrastructure jobs, healthcare for 4.5 million adults, and scholarships for every single four-year college student in the state. Since 2001, Wisconsin's contributions to the endless wars in the Middle East totals $88 billion. Guess what we could have done with that? We could have created 70,300 new clean energy jobs. We could have placed every single Wisconsin child in a Head Start early childhood education program. Or we could have covered the cost of Medicaid for 1.4 million adults for the past 17 years, which clearly was necessary because almost 1,000 people have died in this state from COVID-19. So today, our country and our state value imperialism, prioritizing death over life. We at the Wisconsin Poor People's Campaign are organizing so that we prioritize life over death tomorrow. Jim, not November, right now, tomorrow. So come join us. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, the Wisconsin Poor People's Campaign. Go to our website, wisconsinpoorpeoplescampaign.com. Contact us at the wisconsin@poorpeoplescampaign.org email address, and let us know how we can stand in solidarity with y'all. So I'm going to preempt you, Jim, here, and I'm going to lead a chant this time. How about that? Yeah. All right, so our chant goes like this. I'm going to say forward together, and y'all say not one step back. Hey, there we go. Forward together. Not one step back. Forward together. Not one step back. Come on, y'all. Forward together. Not one step back. Thank you so much.
Next we have fellow Sanders delegate, Tommy Molina, and an organizer for Voces de la Frontera.
Thank you, Noel. As Noel said, my name is Tommy Molina. I'm a community organizer with Voces de la Frontera. And I'm just here to say a few words about the state of affairs in our country. What will they say when they pen the story of our generation, when all we've known is war? What will they say when we've invaded in the name of oil? What will they say when we've occupied in the name of profit? They will ask why we did not declare the most important war, and that is the war against poverty and the war against racism. That is the war against climate change and the war against inequality. So as I stand here and contemplate casting a vote in November, I still wonder, where will we be in 4 years? I say, where is the president that will veto any legislation that does not meet the basic needs of the starving masses? I say, where is the political party that will vote to cut the military by 10%? I say, where is the Congress that will guarantee the humanity of those in this country? And yes, that means a pathway to citizenship. I say, where are the commissions, the police chiefs, and district attorneys that hold rogue police officers like Michael Mattioli accountable instead of giving us all lip service?
Yeah.
Yes.
I say, where are the politicians who will march in the streets until the people's revolution is complete? Because, my brothers and sisters, we have no time to waste, and there is no time to lose. We have no time to waste for politicians who sell us their empty promises. And we have no time to lose on budgets that inflate the military-industrial complex and squeeze the working families of America.
Yeah.
We have no time to waste on providing for the 160,000, the 170,000 who have lost a loved one to COVID in America. And there is no time to lose on providing for the millions more in need of employment and economic reform.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why we must not remain complacent. That's why we must march until our demands are met. And that's why I could not in good conscience vote for that moderate party platform that was presented before me.
Yes!
Because when they ask me, what will they pen the story of your generation? I'll tell them that I did as the great John R. Lewis asked us all to do. And that is, let them say that it was my generation that laid down the heavy burdens of hate at last. And let them say it was my generation where peace finally triumphed over violence, aggression, and war. So I say to you all, walk with the wind, brothers and sisters, and let the spirit of peace and the power of everlasting love be your guide. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tommy. Last but not least, we have Representative David Bowen, who is the former vice chair of the Democratic Party of Wisconsin and a fellow Sanders delegate.
All right, yeah.
Thank you so much. Peace activists, make some noise. Awesome, awesome. I'm State Representative David Bowen, and I'm honored to be here. Honored for the invitation. Make some noise for Jim, please. I know a number of Bernie delegates and folks that have been in this struggle, in this battle for quite some time, and Jim is one of the biggest examples of just not giving up and always being engaged. So thank you so much, Jim.
Thank you, David.
Yeah. One of the things I want to highlight is just this moment that we're in right now. As I speak, there are people that are marching for the 80th, today was the 80th day straight that they've been marching for Black Lives right here in Milwaukee, the longest running protest in the country. And the amount of militarization that we've seen in our police departments, the amount of wrong focus that we have, ill focus that we have, are not actually addressing threats to our communities, to our livelihoods, but it's addressing people that want to change the system. It's targeting, harassing, wrongly arresting, wrongly ticketing, wrongly irritating people who want to change the world. And the biggest example that we've experienced right here has been the Watrous and Milwaukee police departments that have not been upfront, have not been clear on how they should treat people right here locally who want to change the system. I've gone back and forth with police chiefs. I've gone back and forth with staffs of our local police departments. And unfortunately, there are some people that are much more tied to the status quo than to change. But I can even tell you there are law enforcement officers who are on the ground who even agree with us. They agree that it's time for us to have a significant shift in how, not only that we have police departments that respond to situations that they're actually prepared for, but actually that we scale back the amount of burden that we place on police departments for things that we practically could have other departments, other personnel, other staff respond to. So defunding the police departments is very real. And I'd like to thank people that are here that have been supporting with your resources, your time, your energy, your dollars to make sure that this current surge of activism continues. And I also want to highlight the importance on the federal level. Currently, we do have a president that has targeted people that want to change the system, that want to, once and for all, not push it down the line, not kick the can down the road, but actually addressing racial justice in our lifetime and not leaving that for our kids. It is the people that are standing up right now to make this union more perfect. It is not Donald Trump. Make some noise for that. Will never be defeated. The people united will never be defeated. The people united will never be defeated. The people united will never be defeated. I like that energy. I like that energy. So in 2020, we got some important work to do, but in 2022, we have a U.S. Senator right here in Wisconsin that has a very important role. And he's supposed to be the protector of Homeland Security. He's supposed to be the chair of Homeland Security. But people in our homeland have been going without. And I'm so proud of the members of Congress that are stepping up for a 10% cut in defense spending, because $74 billion can do a lot to invest right back home in the lives of people and children and school districts and families that have been waiting for those investments, that have been waiting for their fair share of investment, their fair share of the piece of the pie for the American dream. I believe that we can get there. I think this whole resurgence of activism actually is about really believing that we can get there. And that means Senator Ron Johnson has to go too. So in Wisconsin, we got some homework to do. We got some people to reach out to. Some of them don't know how progressive our party platform is. Some of them don't know how much we are really putting the emphasis on and really changing things for good. And I have to tell you, there are folks all over our community that are empathetic because we've been in this place before. We've tried to get them to believe in a system that clearly shows that it's so stubborn to change that it will fight tooth and nail to not do that. But there is hope. There is hope when I see people that are on the front lines and protest. There are people and hope in people that are continuing to push back against figures that have police departments behind them, that have weapons behind them, that have resources behind them, and they don't care. And those young people, those multi-generational people, those multiracial people, those people that are coming together right now in this moment are defining what it is to change America. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much to all of our speakers. How many delegates are here? Can you guys all come to the front? Biden delegates, Sanders delegates. This is really kind of special. I think to everybody here, as we all know, the DNC was, effectively canceled physically. So this is, that I know of, like one of the only physical times that we'll be together, and I think we have people watching on Facebook, so this is like a moment of solidarity for us to stand together, and we want to invest in people, not violence.
Yes. Love you, delegates.